Hi, everyone. Welcome to this 8th lecture in our series on law and ethics in AI for animal welfare. So this is the last lecture. And in the end of this lecture, actually, instead of myself explaining case studies, I found a very nice YouTube video that you can look at. It's a panel discussion that happened some time ago on different aspects of AI ethics in animal welfare. So you can take a look at this video on your own and maybe you get some inspiration for ideas for your own presentations. Please do send me your presentation topics. And if you need to discuss the topics with me, if you don't have an idea what topic to take, also just email me or write me a message. And we can talk on Zoom, for instance, and decide a topic together. I can help you if you need it. Otherwise, just inform me and I can review it once and approve it. So in this 8th lecture, I'm going to share my screen. We are looking at, again, the EU AI Act. This time we will look at some of the provisions of the Act a little bit more closely. We will not go too deep into it because a lot of it is just extreme details which you as veterinary specialists don't need to know. But definitely it is useful to have a look so that you can think about these issues and whether especially we are looking at the challenges and limitations of the AI Act itself. I would like to say also at the outset that just because a legal issue or an ethical issue is not covered under the European AI Act, it doesn't mean that there is no legal remedy. Actually, there might be remedy under simple contract law, there might be remedy under simple tort law. So if you want to know more about those, we can talk during your presentations, or you can also contact me separately. So as we go through this last lecture, there are a few things you might notice. The first thing you will see is that the AI Act, it not only incorporates ethical principles that we discussed in the last 2 lectures, but also uses and puts into kind of a practical application or operation the approaches to ethical decision making that we discussed in lectures 4 and 5. And of course, this includes both Western and Eastern approaches to ethical decision making. So see what you think about this, no? Now, it's very important to understand at the outset why EU has adopted an AI regulation. Contrary to what you might think, it is not to minimize or eliminate the risks linked to improper applications of AI. It is also not the primary aim of the regulation to dictate how AI systems are to be built, or it's not dictating principles on which these are to be built. But the aim of the regulation, as it is stating here, is really to promote the marketing and uptake of human-centric AI. Now, of course, it is wanting to improve the functioning of the internal market by putting down a uniform legal framework for the development, placing on the market, and putting into service of AI systems. And the idea, as I said, is to promote the uptake of human-centric and trustworthy AI. And at the same time, of course, the regulation wants to ensure that the putting of these systems into the market doesn't lead to any compromise of health, safety, or fundamental human rights. So they want to also promote innovation while securing health, safety, and rights, and most importantly, to open up the EU market in a uniform way so that EU AI systems that are developed in one part of Europe can be uniformly also traded, sold in all other parts of Europe, and hopefully also globally. So similar to the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation of Europe, it is likely that the AI regulation of EU also becomes a global standard. So it's a very important piece of legislation. That's why we're looking at it briefly, although its application in the AI for animal welfare segment may or may not be very immense. So coming now, we see that the EU AI Act regulates AI, or rather I should say it regulates the introduction of AI-based systems into the EU market. And this regulation happens based on the risk levels. Before we come to these 4 different risk levels, it is important to note that because the AI Act regulates the introduction of AI systems into the market, the regulation as such does not apply to AI systems or models that are developed or put into service for the sole purpose of scientific research and development. So, of course, if by continuation of that, it also means that it does not apply to any research, testing, and development activity which is happening before the system is placed on the market. So this, of course, this exemption does not apply when you are trying out your AI system in the real world conditions. Then again, the AI Act will apply. You cannot even test your system in real world conditions unless you have complied with the provisions of the Act. So with this background, with understanding that there's a research exception to the provisions of the AI Act, we come back to the risk levels. So what you see is at the top, we have the unacceptable risk level. So this leads to what is called prohibited AI, that is systems that are ranked as having unacceptable risk are prohibited from being marketed in the EU. So they may not be introduced into the EU market at all under no circumstance. And these include systems, for example, for social scoring, for facial recognition, for manipulation of thought patterns or of emotions of people. So these are all unacceptable high risk. Of course, there might be some countries in the world where social scoring, for example, using AI is happening. I think China is an example. But in EU, that is not acceptable. Below unacceptable risk, we see this category of high risk. This is the most important risk category. It is also the most heavily regulated under the Act. And we notice that what falls under these high risk AI are AI systems that seek to replace human decision making with AI-based decision making, particularly in fields that can impact human rights. So, for example, decisions as to employment. For example, IBM had a software that was using AI to shortlist candidates, and it was found to be biased. I think we saw this example earlier. Or access to education, shortlisting for admission into a university or a school. If the human decision making is replaced by AI decision makers, then this is a high risk AI. Or access to public services, or even access to what are known as scarce resources. So, for example, you want to determine which areas are going to get prioritized for either relief measures or, say, for electric systems or water systems to be put into place. These are public services and these are scarce resources. And if the AI system is replacing human decision making in which areas to prioritize, this is a high risk system because it has a potential of impacting human rights. Also, credit scoring, insurance, border control, justice systems, whether or not you get parole. These are issues that are traditionally taken care of by the police force or by the judiciary. And if you're replacing these human-based systems with AI systems, they are categorized as high risk. Now, you will see here that in determining whether a system is a high-risk system under Article 7 of the AI Act, you will see that the act is looking at actual or potential harm. So will the system potentially cause harm or actually cause harm? And this, of course, brings us back to the consequences. If you remember in lecture 3 or 4, was it, we discussed the Western approaches to ethical decision making, where we discussed the consequentialist approach. And there we see here that if there is a possibility of harm and there is potential harm, it is all about the consequences of deployment of the system. So in fact, the act itself uses the word consequences quite often, no? So if you also look, for example, the biometric identification systems are classified as high-risk systems, which means they are not banned, but in some instances, they may be banned. And they are going to be banned, especially when using the consequentialist approach, the system is seen to impact the rights and freedoms of all persons concerned. And they will also look at the seriousness and the probability and scale of those consequences. So you'll see that the consequentialist approach to ethical decision making is operationalized or is used in the EU Act to determine certain things. Similarly, we see the Eastern approaches also being operationalized or used in the AI Act. In fact, we see this term, intended purpose. The obligations of any person that is putting an AI system into the market, these obligations under the Act are heavily dependent on the manner in which the intended purpose of that AI system has been defined by the person putting the system into the market. So here, if you remember the Eastern approaches to ethical decision making and the imagery of Skanda, we see that the first goddess linked with that imagery is a symbol of human intention or human desire. So what is your practical intended purpose with which you are putting a system into the market? And based on this intention, actually the act is determining many things. So in fact, if you look at it, the draft AI Act, before it was enforced or brought into force, already used the term intended purpose 37 times. And actually the final act mentions the term 50 times in various contexts. So the intended purpose is used to determine, first and foremost, whether an AI system should be categorized as high risk at all. It is also used to determine the risk management systems that need to be put into place, what is the type of data governance system that has to be put into place, what kind of record keeping is required, the transparency provisions, whether and to what extent human oversight is required for managing the AI systems. All of these things are dependent on the intended purpose of the AI Act. In fact, the Act determines whether or not the data that is used to train, test, and validate an AI system is representative and complete. And this is also determined based on the system's intended purpose. At this time, I would like you to take a moment and think about why the intended purpose of an AI system is so important and central to the regulation of AI systems, or the introduction of the AI systems into the marketplace. Why is this so important? Can you maybe pause the video right now, or pull out your PPTs that I have uploaded separately and take a moment to really think about this question. Why is the intended purpose so important? In fact, what implications may or may not this intended purpose aspect have on the use of AI systems in the animal welfare sector? Take a moment to think about it. You might also be surprised to know that this intended purpose is so central to the EU regulations that if a person who's putting an AI system into the market chooses later on to change the intended purpose, then they have to go through the whole regulatory process from the beginning, from scratch. They have to go through the process all over again, as though they're introducing a new system into the market. So coming back now to risk levels, we see that high-risk AI is, however, not only classified on the basis of potential harm or on the basis of consequences, or even only on the basis of intended purpose. We see that a high-risk AI system is actually quite narrowly defined in one sense in the Act, and it is linked to the instances, actually the 8 instances that are specified in the third annex of the Act. I will upload the EU AI Act into your Vetucation platform so that you can browse through Annex 3 on your own as well. So broadly, you will see that an AI system is considered high risk if it falls into one of the following 8 categories. So we already saw biometric identification and categorization of natural persons is permitted but high risk. Management and operation of critical infrastructure, any AI system that is shortlisting people for educational or vocational training, any AI system that is shortlisting people for employment, for management, and access to self-employment, access and enjoyment of essential private services and public services, and any benefits, any AI system used in law enforcement, any AI system that is used for determining migration or asylum rights or in border control measures, and in any AI system that is used for the administration of justice and for democratic processes. All these AI systems are categorized as high-risk AI systems. And in these instances, actually, if you see, the law presumes that these particular categories are definitely going to have a potential impact on the fundamental rights or the health and safety of an individual or of the environment. And the probability of occurrence of harm is pretty high in these instances, definitely. So for that reason, it is put already as a definitely high risk category. So now I want you to think again that AI systems that support animal welfare, do you think they may be categorized under any of these categories of Annex 3? Do note here that the list of high-risk AI systems in Annex 3 contains a limited number of AI systems. And as I said, the risks linked to such systems have either already materialized in the real world in some context or the other, or they are very likely to materialize in the future. And that is why the regulation states them. But at the same time, the regulation is also a little bit open-ended. The Commission may expand the list of high-risk AI systems, and the criteria for this is settled in Article 7, Chapter 3 of the Act, and which lists, of course, the circumstances under which the use cases of Annex 3 may be expanded. But do read Article 7. It's quite interesting because it still seems somehow that if you want to go outside of these 8 categories, you have to make a pretty strong case. Now, I've just given you a little excerpt from the annex. For example, if you're talking about essential private and public services, then if the system is evaluating the eligibility of a natural person to access public assistance, or if it is assessing, the AI system is assessing the creditworthiness of natural persons, or establishing their credit score, or it is used to dispatch or establish priority in dispatching of emergency, or AI systems used for risk assessment. These are some examples from the 5th paragraph in Annex 3, which are all categorized as high-risk AI. So what do you notice vis-a-vis systems for animal welfare? I would welcome you to now again take a moment, go to the EU AI Act, which I have uploaded onto your Vetucation platform, and read Annex 3. Do you feel like AI systems for animal welfare would fall into any of the categories of Annex 3? Why or why not? No, think about that. That might be a very interesting exercise for you. Now, if an AI system is not found to fall within the high-risk system, it may still fall within a limited risk system. For example, general purpose AI. For example, we have ChatGPT. ChatGPT nowadays is being used for all kinds of things, including for medical diagnosis. No? So this is actually quite a high risk AI, but because it is not replacing human decision making, and really it's at the risk of the user to just take the ChatGPT's advice, it is considered a limited risk. However, it is important to note here that these general purpose AI systems are, although they are categorized as limited risk in one place, they are also classified within the Act in a way that if they present what are known as systemic risks, then they need also to be monitored. No, so they may still be required to fulfill major regulatory requirements if the general purpose AI presents systemic risks. So they have to then establish similar risk management policies, continuous monitoring once they're released into the market, and so forth. No, so in my opinion, it's really debatable whether chatbots and emotion recognition systems are limited risk. Because if you look at it, even from human health point of view, chatbots that are now being used for supporting loneliness or anxiety disorders, they can lead to all kinds of problems, like addictions to the chat box and a host of issues. So it's not entirely certain whether everything within limited risk will remain limited risk. And even if the EU AI Act doesn't cover it, it is highly likely that other fields of law will come down quite harsh on these types of systems. But that's a long discussion that requires a completely separate forum. We see for ourselves here, in the context of animal welfare and AI, where do you think the systems that are used for animal welfare monitoring using AI, where do you think they should fall and why? This is a question that you might want to think about. Minimal risk systems like video games and spam filters, you can add to that list based on your own understanding and experience. So we also see that when we're talking about high risk AI system, there is a clear quality control requirement, no? And there is, of course, quality control requirement generally under contract and tort law. So it doesn't matter whether or not the EU AI Act covers the systems which are limited risk and low risk or minimal risk. Other fields of law can still cover it. Now, this brings me actually to the challenges and the limitations. If you see the AI Act, the emphasis of the Act is really on human rights. And if you read these basic human rights here, I want you to take a moment and think about whether any of these human rights might be directly impacted through an AI system that is designed to promote animal welfare. For example, is it possible that the AI system is introduced into an animal farm and this leads to somehow that farm being discriminated against? Is that then an indirect human rights violation? So it's important to think about whether, first of all, whether an AI system must protect not just human rights, but also animal rights directly, why or why not? And then the question I was coming to, can animal rights or at least animal welfare be secured in an indirect way through one or the other of these human rights being violated by an AI system, as I said, through, for example, prohibition of discrimination or protection of property, no? So give it a thought, why or why not, how or why not. These can then also form discussion points or case studies that you can present to your class as your presentation. And similarly, I would like you to also think about the risk levels, as we were saying. No, would a badly designed animal welfare monitoring system be considered high risk? And if so, then under which category of Annex 3? And at which risk level would you place AI-based animal welfare systems? These are questions I already raised in a previous slide. And are there other better ways of regulating such systems within or outside of the AI Act? These are research questions for you. Depending on the degree of your interest in the regulation of this sphere, you can conduct some searches of your own. What I do highly recommend is going to YouTube and watching this video. We're not going to watch it right now because it's more than 1 hour long. But I would highly recommend taking the time, just put in this title CARE 2024 panel discussion, put this into YouTube search, and this video will come up. It's a panel discussion on AI and animal advocacy. I found it quite interesting because it highlights some of the ethical and legal issues quite well. So do take a look. It might give you some inspiration and some ideas for your own presentations. And with that, I would like to close the lectures and leave it for you guys, maybe over 3 or 4 sessions if needed. We can have student presentations. Each student presentation would be 20 minutes long, followed by 10 minutes Q&A. And I do highly request and recommend that everybody be present for all other students' presentations, because it's a huge learning process, for a learning opportunity for all of us to hear each other's presentations. And I will give extra points if you ask questions to your colleagues when you are not presenting. So asking questions to other people who are presenting during the 10-minute question time, I'll give you extra points for that. With that, I would just like to leave you with a larger thought that I read recently from Jane Goodall, and think maybe about whether AI's role in animal welfare can in some way be supported or augmented by our own human choices. So with that, I would like to end my segment. And I hope you enjoyed the lectures. I hope they were meaningful for you and informative. Please do write me some feedback on whether you'd like to see something more or less. If I should include, if I am giving these lectures again sometime, if you would like to see some specific topics covered in greater detail, I would love to hear your feedback. Until then, I wish you all the best, and I'm very much looking forward to your presentations.